I have a very important question. Who is the enemy? Throughout American history, at different points in time, we would say communists are the enemy, or Nazis, or Islamo-fascists. But who really is the enemy? Who was it that financed each of these entities?
Forward march!
So here we have hundreds of former military veterans in Washington marching in formation, protesting the Federal Reserve Bank. To these former veterans, the Federal Reserve is the enemy. The bankers are the enemy. And why is that? Because the bankers finance both sides of war. Usury, the bankers' secret war on humanity. Unconventional warfare not discussed in college, church, the media, or Congress. The purpose of this presentation is so that we're no longer duped to hate, avoid World War III, and C, to understand that monetary reform is the key to our emancipation. Key concepts? Number 1, sovereignty versus usurpation. 2, how the banksters corrupted the money system. And 3, understanding unconventional warfare. First, let's start off with sovereignty versus usurpation. Who do we really serve? The war propaganda that we're taught from kindergarten on is that we the people vote for representatives. That we the people are the sovereigns, that we're in charge. The truth is the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules. And I don't know about you, I don't own a gold mine, and I don't own a Federal Reserve printing press. From the Bible it says in Proverbs 22:7, borrower is slave to the lender. That means the creditors are the sovereigns and the debtors are the slaves. The creditors are in charge. That matches with what the Federal Reserve Chairman says when he is asked the question, what's the proper relationship between a President of the United States and the Chairman of the Federal Reserve?
What is the proper relationship? What should be the proper relationship between a chairman of the Fed and a president of the United States?
Well, first of all, the Federal Reserve is an independent agency, and that means basically that there is no other agency of government which can overrule actions that we take.
The Federal Reserve Chairman says there is no agency of government which can overrule actions that we take. That means the president, for all of his imperial power and majesty that we see on the TV, he has no capacity to overrule actions that the chairman of the Federal Reserve makes. That means the bankers are in charge. Usurpation. Noun. Illegal seizure and occupation of a throne, position of authority. Usurpation is what's happened to the United States of America, in fact, all of planet Earth. The usurpers are acting as earthly gods. They've illegally seized and occupied the throne of God and our government. And you know, history repeats. And that means the victors or the usurpers write the history. So what we learn in school is actually a version of history taught by the usurpers. They teach us that these wars are collisions between different economic systems. There's a collision between fascism and capitalism, and communism and fascism and capitalism. All these different systems are warring on each other. What they don't tell you is that the bankers financed all of these different systems. The true history of the world is that history is the story of slavery and emancipation. And that story of slavery and emancipation is the story of the bankers enslaving humanity, and that story of emancipation from slavery is our Jubilee. Each of the ancient prophets forbid usury. Moses, Joshua, Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha. Irrespective of whatever your religious inclination is, each of the prophets forbid usury. Well, what does usury mean exactly? If you read a dictionary, it says excessive interest. If you read a Bible, it says any interest. But the definition of usury from practical application means it's the bankster's usurpation of the money system so that the money system becomes a weapon of slavery. Number 2, how the banksters corrupted the money system. In order to understand how money was corrupted, we have to first understand specifically the definition of money and how money naturally evolved from barter. We all agree that money is just an extension of barter. Let's watch the chicken note. The chicken note. How money was invented, then later hijacked by the banksters. Once upon a time, there was no such thing as money. Then, a chicken farmer invented it by accident. Woefully, his invention was later stolen by scheming banksters. Before money, the chicken farmer would simply barter whole chickens for things he needed at the market. He bartered chickens for fish, flowers, cupcakes, and vegetables. Everyone knew that one barter equals 2 IOUs. I owe you 1 chicken, you owe me 1 fish. I owe you 1 chicken, you owe me a bunch of flowers. I owe you 1 chicken, you owe me a bunch of cupcakes. I owe you 1 chicken, you owe me a bunch of vegetables. Everyone was happy, and this went on for years. But then one day the chicken farmer was at the market and he discovered a grand basket that he wanted for his wife. Sadly, he realized he had no chickens to trade. Then he remembered, 1 barter equals 2 IOUs. The barter could be 1 written chicken IOU and you owe me 1 basket. This would be a barter just with a small delay. Then he said, would you, dear weaver, accept my written and signed IOU in exchange for the basket? You can accept my rain check IOU as a marker for now until I return tomorrow, and you can redeem my IOU for a chicken. The weaver carefully considered the written IOU a chicken as part of a delayed barter. Then he agreed. Snap! The chicken farmer just invented money in the form of a chicken note. News of the chicken note spread quickly. Because the other farmers market vendors knew the chicken farmer, they began accepting the chicken note as well. Later, other vendors began issuing their own IOU notes as well. Producers of all sorts of products issued and redeemed their own self-issued IOU money. The community had a completely independent, barter-based, abundant money supply. There was no unemployment and plenty of money to build roads. Their local economy thrived and the town grew quickly. The chicken note would be the inspiration of millions of other types of IOU money. currency issued by modern producers. Restaurant gift certificates, grocery store coupons, airline frequent flyer miles, daily deals, sports and concert tickets, and even Valentine's Day gifts from blushing high school boys to their girlfriends. A digital form of IOU money operates as mutual credit and time banks. So long as producers issue paper and digital IOU money, it's a form of sound money. We never need to accumulate unpayable debts, suffer from scarce money, pay interest, or inflation. The technology of money serves humanity rather than dominates. If only we could issue our own self-issued IOU money to pay bank loans, utilities, gasoline, and taxes. Do you know why we can't? Because scheming banksters deliberately counterfeited and corrupted our own independent money in what many believe to be the world's first false flag incident. The banksters pretended to be the chicken farmer and then overissued the chicken note so that they became impossible to redeem for chickens. Then they created their own monopoly money, which only they can issue. Sadly, we are forced to buy and sell with their monopoly money, or else it would be nearly impossible to live. Worse, the banksters' monopoly money is created with interest. This makes money perpetually scarce, which makes our lives even more difficult. Additionally, the banksters mostly create new money for things they support, like war, stormtrooper police, poisonous food, puppet politicians, and mind-controlled media. Deceptive media, which never properly explains the simple genius of the chicken note. Woefully today, small chicken farmers and their hard-working friends at the market are typically broke, even though they do the most important jobs. Meanwhile, the corrupt bankers and their complicit friends are loaded, all because the power of money has been hijacked from regular people.
So I hope that video was enlightening. And that begs the question, why is counterfeiting illegal exactly? Well, what the counterfeiter is doing is they're creating pieces of paper or digits in the form of money so that they can steal the commercial energy of the producers. Well, who is it that are the producers? Well, the producers are regular people who create products and services for other regular people. Well, in this economic system of usury usurpation, the bankers are actually counterfeiting our chicken notes or our IOUs. The bankers are counterfeiting our money system. They're living parasitically off of our commercial energy. The reason that Federal Reserve notes have value isn't because of the bankers, it's because of us. It's our energy and belief and faith in the money system that gives the Federal Reserve notes value. It's not because of a couple bankers that the Federal Reserve notes have power. It's because of our belief. What's powerful to understand with this system of parasitism of our commercial energy is to realize that the bankers don't even need taxes, they don't need votes or our consent or a majority of the people. They can simply issue brand new Federal Reserve notes and they can finance counterintelligence operations, they can finance war, they can do whatever they want without taxes, without votes, without consent. This makes them earthly gods. With a tiny minority, they rule over humanity, systematically stealing our commercial energy through the money system, with the majority of the population completely unrealizing that their commercial energy is being stolen just like a counterfeiter. Number 3, unconventional warfare. I used to read Mad Magazine when I was little, and they had a cartoon of spy versus spy. Well, this is the exact paradigm that the bankers do. They finance both the left and the right to fight each other, in the exact same way that the bankers simultaneously finance the Democrats and the Republicans to divide and conquer humanity. They finance communism and capitalism. I know it seems like a stretch, but the whole thing is an elaborate puppet show. Regardless of whether we vote Democrat or Republican, or even Libertarian, the bankers control all of the different political systems because they control the money system. Irrespective of who we vote for, those politicians have to work for the bankers' money, just like we do. Thus, we all, in little ways, have to sell our soul in order to earn money from the bankers. It's kind of like the bankers control the dog treats, right? You know how you can train a dog with the rewards of puppy treats? You can teach them to sit, beg, roll over. Well, that's exactly what the bankers do with the money system. We learn to sit, beg, and speak over topics that are approved by the bankers. This presentation is not approved by the bankers. Qualities of the usurpers. Number 1, we've demonstrated that they're thieves and they've stolen the power to issue money. They're usurpers and monopolists. Number 2, they're earthly gods and they're psychopaths. Well, how can we prove that they're psychopaths? The usurpers, or the usurers, or the moneylenders, den of thieves, or as Jesus called them, mammon, they play the role of both arsonist and firefighter. That means they both initiate the fire and they then come to put the fire out. Well, why do they do that? Well, it's order out of chaos that benefits them. The reason that it brings order out of chaos is if there was lack of political drama, it would be very obvious to us how the bankers were ruling over us. It would be very plain to see that the bankers were simply issuing our IOUs. But by keeping us in chaos, by keeping us in confusion as to who the true enemy is, by getting us caught up in political theater, we see all this drama and it puts us into a state of fight or flight, like a primitive animal. We don't use our higher thinking capacity to realize that we can easily emancipate ourselves from this paradigm simply by issuing our own money. By keeping us divided and conquered and confused with deliberate acts of false flags, counterintelligence programs, and engineered events, we are always in a state of fear. That's how they rule, through order out of chaos. To demonstrate how they actually have admitted that they're psychopaths, let's talk about Operation Norwoods. This is a declassified Cold War document from 1962, approved by the Pentagon, which documents bankster finance terrorism. And remember, people would say, oh, that's the government doing that. Well, the government doesn't do anything that's not financed by the bankers. Somebody's paying for it. And as they say, he who pays the piper calls the tune. In effect, the government acts as a mercenary group. Delving into Operation Norwoods is to understand that at the period the Cold War was raging, they were deliberately engineering events to go to war with Cuba. Mind you, the Soviet Union was being financed by these same bankers, and the Soviet Union was in turn financing Cuba. So all of this stuff is engineered, but what we're trying to prove is that they would deliberately stage terroristic events. So when we talk about the war on terrorism that the politicians are always talking about, we have to realize it's the bankers who are financing the war on terrorism and then having it implemented through agent provocateurs in and out of the government. Let's read the box there. It says, the description of pretexts which will provide justification for the U.S. military intervention in Cuba. They're looking for a reason to go to war. So the next box reads, they want to finance a Cuban terror campaign. Casualty lists in U.S. newspapers will cause a helpful wave of national indignation. Number 4, we could develop a communist Cuban terror campaign in the Miami area and in other Florida cities and even in Washington. Here it says, let's blow up a U.S. ship just like we did the USS Maine. This is a false flag. In the box it says, A, we could blow up a U.S. ship in Guantanamo Bay and blame it on Cuba. Like psychopaths. Or we could hijack and shoot down an airliner. Number 7, hijacking attempts against civil and surface craft. Number 8, it's possible to create an incident which will demonstrate convincingly that a Cuban aircraft has attacked and shot down a charter civil airliner en route to the United States. Listen to these guys. And again, this was approved by the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Psychopathic generals doing the bidding of psychopathic presidents, doing the bidding of psychopathic bankers. Let's go into the Gulf of Tonkin incident. The Gulf of Tonkin incident was the false flag excuse to bomb North Vietnam, promoted and supported by the Communist Chinese and the Communist Soviet Union, which each were financed by the international bank cabal. In this short video, Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara is going to comment on the Gulf of Tonkin incident of August the 4th, 1964. By the way, that's 2 years after Operation Norwoods, where he admits that the Gulf of Tonkin incident did not happen.
No, it was just confusion. And events afterwards showed that our judgment that we'd been attacked that day was wrong.
So what's the outcome of the Cold War? Number 1, many of the threats of communism have actually come true in the United States. So what they do is they hype the threat of communism so that good-meaning people go to war and are willing to die. Both my mother and father, my brother and myself all volunteered to go to war, just like the members of the military that were protesting the Federal Reserve in the beginning of this presentation. Well, they wake up, they get angry, and they see who the real terrorists are. Because while we go and fight these patsy enemies, not that the communists weren't killing people, not that they didn't commit genocide, but what ends up happening is through the back door, a police state has been created in the United States. The godless commies that we were supposed to be afraid of in the Soviet Union, this massive atheism movement has come into the United States where you're no longer allowed to put a nativity scene in the public square. The 10 Commandments have to be taken down. And in the Soviet Union, remember how the Soviets didn't have real elections because regardless of who you picked the Communist Party? Well, that's exactly what we have in the United States. Regardless of who we pick, we are picking a bank puppet that's going to be working for the bankers for banker money. Number 2, millions have died. Millions have suffered. And millions of people have ongoing cancer from Agent Orange, etc., etc. Number 3, trillions of dollars have been added to the national debt. $13 trillion in inflation-adjusted dollars have been spent on that phony Cold War. Are you disgusted like we are?
I mean, let's remember here, the people we are fighting today, we funded 20 years ago.
Wag the Dog. Remember that movie where they staged a pageant about war to get everybody all worked up? Well, what do you need for a war? Well, you need a boogeyman. And there's endless supply of boogeymen. Well, think about it, going back to Hitler. Well, wasn't Hitler Times Man of the Year for a couple times? Wasn't Stalin the Time Man of the Year? Wasn't Osama bin Laden? All of these guys were promoted by the West at various times, along with Saddam Hussein, Manuel Noriega. Over and over this thing happens. So it's happening today where, seen in the picture, you take a boogeyman, put it up in Syria, and the United States has a cause, an excuse to go to war.
It's going to show some of those weapons from Benghazi ended up in the hands of ISIS. So we helped build ISIS. Now there's a danger there.
And that's what the bankers want. They always want us to be at war. Isn't that exactly what the devil wants? Doesn't the devil just want us to be at war, dividing and conquering and killing each other, enslaving one another? Well, that's exactly what has happened to planet Earth. And that's why all of the prophets told us to forbid usury, usurpation. Innovated slavery. A, we all feed the beast which is warring on us. B, we cannot buy or sell without taking the mark of the beast. The mark of the beast is the usury-based Federal Reserve note. There's a pyramid on the back. That signifies Pharaoh. Pharaoh was acting as a man god, an earthly god. Well, obviously Pharaoh didn't create the heavens, animals, planet Earth. But by controlling and monopolizing the money system, he, all by himself, could rule over thousands, hundreds of thousands, and enslave them. Unfortunately, we all have a terminal addiction. We have to admit that we're enslaving ourselves through the money system, and that if we don't change it, we are going to die. And in fact, even if we don't die physically, we're not living our true life, our authentic life, a life free of fear, poverty. Life is defined by achieving and self-actualizing, achieving the true potential of our soul. Well, humanity is not achieving its highest potential, and it's time that we do. Let's review. Number one, we discussed sovereignty versus usurpation. The sovereign, who is the true sovereign? He who creates, controls. Obviously, God or the Creator is the sovereign. The problem is these man gods have usurped the sovereignty of God on planet Earth. That's why Jesus flipped the money lenders' tables. That was an affront to God. It's time for us to turn the tables too. Number two, how the bankers corrupted the money system. They basically counterfeited our chicken notes. Number three, in conventional warfare. It's essential for us to realize that what's going on in planet Earth isn't an accident. This isn't just about profit. This is about an intentional form of slavery on humanity. No man can serve two masters. You cannot serve both God and mammon. Jesus explained how this form of warfare occurs. Mammon has usurped the sovereignty of God on planet Earth. Unfortunately, good Christians, Jews, Muslims, while they will proclaim that they serve God in words, in our deeds, we go to work for Pharaoh or Mammon. And that's what the usurpation of the money system. And there's only one way to fix it. In the beginning of this presentation, we got to see how well-meaning veterans were protesting, "End the Fed, end the Fed." That is not the path to our emancipation. It's not that we need to end the Federal Reserve. We just need to make the Federal Reserve obsolete. And this is exemplified in Buckminster Fuller's quote, "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, you build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete." So the thinking here is not to end the Fed through legislation, because we can't do that. The bankers have hired the politicians to protect them. The politicians are bank puppets. They are not going to bite the hand that feeds. We have to start off locally and create a new monetary system from the ground up. A new monetary system that creates such massive abundance that it'll make the Federal Reserve obsolete. And over time, we can slowly wean ourselves off of our addiction, our dependence on the Federal Reserve. A good analogy for this is when I was growing up and going skiing, I used to have a Sony Walkman, which was awesome because I could listen to music for the first time that I picked on a tape cassette. The problem is it was the size of a small book, and if you fell on your chest, it would knock the wind out of you. Later, Apple came up with the iPod, which is tiny. Well, the iPod never need to have an initiative to go around protesting the Sony Walkman. They didn't have protests going, "In the Sony Walkman, in the Sony Walkman." All they did is create a better product which made the Sony Walkman obsolete. Well, that's exactly what we're going to do with our money. Our money is completely different than the Federal Reserve note. Our money is similar to the chicken note because the chicken note and our money is issued by regular people without interest locally, and it's abundant. We never have to suffer from scarcity or usurpation by the bankers. And since we create the money, the bankers are never able to parasitically steal our commercial energy through the money system, go to war, despite our lack of approval. This is how we can simultaneously create massive abundance and eliminate the bankers' ability to go to war through our dependence on the Federal Reserve note. And here's the secret sauce. Because each of us will be issuing our own money based upon our own businesses, it allows us to become sovereigns without subjects. And what that means, each of us has our own unique gift and skill. We all have incredible capacity to create. We can work in the vocation of our passion. And by doing that, we become self-actualized. And when we all become self-actualized on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we get out of survival mode where we're able to just kind of have the basics, food, water, shelter. We move up and then we become self-actualized. And then we have peak experiences. Well, that's the message of the Jubilee. We're talking about the emancipation of the collective human spirit. We're talking about the fulfillment of prophecy, where humanity flips the pyramid of power and once again serves God. I'm pretty excited about this. Aren't you?
Did you see the video by Michael Rivero called All Wars Are Banker Wars?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
What don't you think is accurate?
Well, all wars are banker wars, but Rivero blames central banks, but they've only been around 400 years. Meanwhile, Mammon, which is the money monopoly, has been around for over 5,000 years. This is why Moses, Joshua, Muhammad, and Buddha all forbid usury, money monopoly.
Doesn't usury mean interest?
Usury means money monopoly first, then any interest.
So, Mammon can engineer wars without a central bank or government?
Exactly. Mammon grows in power when humanity is divided and conquered.
Sick. That means usury is a parasite that feeds off of our negative energy.
That's why Jesus slipped. It's our responsibility as believers to abolish usury.
How'd you learn all this?
Not at church. You gotta get the Usury Free Jubilee podcast.
We can beat the banksters in less than a year. To learn how, subscribe to the Usury Free Jubilee Monetary Reform podcast on iTunes, Podomatic, Spreaker, or Stitcher.